sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again. This is a recording.
Are you listening?
Listen to people. Learn what you can.
What is racist and what is just ignorance?
If you've got a friend or an ally or somebody in your corner there to support you, amazing.
I just can't wait for the day where we're no longer pleasantly surprised that someone is LGBT+.
Ask questions on a personal level, do better.
Asking pronouns.
It was like the moment that I realised I was different.
Winning that award topped this year off for me.
Because without you, this world wouldn't be the same.
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Are you listening?
Hi guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're well and looking after yourselves. My name is Jord Hailwood and I'm the host of this episode for Pride Month, and I am joined by Molly and Jazz. And I just wanted to say happy Pride to anyone who's part of the queer/LGBTQ+ community, as well as those who are allies. Throughout this episode, me, Molly and Jazz will be discussing current queer representations, as well as the history behind it and what it's taken for us to get where we are. And I hope you enjoy listening. So guys, recently there's been a real demand and popularity for Heartstopper. It's literally internationally been recognized by every spectre of every scale over the globe currently. I can't stop seeing it. What's everyone's thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's really cool. I love that it's sort of showing gay romance and queer romance. I guess innocently is the right word. A lot of LGBT+ media seems to be centered around the prejudice and hatred that's faced, and so it feels really refreshing but also realistic to just look at queer teenagers being happy, and I really like that.
Yeah, and I also really like how I don't know if it's just me who seems to find this particular content, but I find that a lot of content which is focused on queer characters and queer romance can be quite sexualized, and this one isn't at all. This one's very minimal, very wholesome, and it's just quite cutesy. And I think the dynamic between the two main characters is very healthy and it's very against what usually seems to be the case, during with some individual being somewhat aggressive or coming across quite negatively, and that isn't the case here. And I think it's really important to communicate how, there can be some very smooth transitions when it comes to establishing a queer relationship, because it's not always the case that it's going to be negative. Heartstopper does it in a very wholesome way, which is also, well, it's quite promising and optimistic more than anything else, I think. It's really fundamental to queer people.
Yeah, a lot of media, especially about younger queer people, can often be about sort of homophobia and transphobia and the sort of discrimination and hatred that they face, and that's very important to acknowledge. But when you're going through that sort of thing on a day-to-day basis and you're turning on the TV and you're seeing it again, it gets sort of tiring. I
guess it can be quite a burden having to deal with the further trauma. Do you know what I mean? You're already, you say, you're experiencing it in your everyday circumstances, face to face potentially, and then because media is a sense of escapism for a lot of people, and then having to like you say, switch on the TV and then to revisit that particular trauma. I believe it's very essential, it's necessary, but also it's important to be able to have something a bit more, I don't know, positive health.
I think it's quite good to see this kind of thing on Netflix too, because we often see the actors are cast really older, much older than their characters and things like that. But in this case, it does feel like they are teenagers.
Yeah.
And
I think they're all quite young, to be fair. I think they're all about 18, 19 when I check. Makes it more realistic for sure.
I think it's just quite good to see this sort of thing with representation of young British teenagers and not just 30-year-old American people.
What do you guys think about the diversity of the cast? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think she was in Heartstopper. The girl that's, I think she's just been cast in Doctor Who.
Yeah. She plays Elle. She
Oh,
plays
yeah.
one of the best friends of Charlie.
Yeah, I
Yasmin
thought I
Mohammed.
remembered her. She's really cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I think they've done very well at spreading a real range of characters for different identities and different races. I think they've done it in a very clever casting. What I really like about Elle, so Elle's obviously a trans woman of color, and I really like how they have that representation as well. She's a very positive character, and I think that's also further. I mean, I'm not a trans person, so I can't speak directly too much on that. But I think for trans people to see someone, like you said, who's on Netflix, which is the most popular streaming platform as of current, in a very popular, demanding TV show, in a very positive, well-respected role, is also great representation for queer people, specifically trans people.
Yeah, I think it would be great if they could get her or characters like her in sort of more of a leading role as well, because
Yeah.
she's great as such a positive background influence, but there definitely needs to be, and fortunately it looks like they're going to be creating more opportunities for trans people of color. I don't know, Jazz, you've read the books, right? Does Elle have a bigger role? Is there a possibility for a sequel where we see more of her or something like that?
Well, I thought that in the show they sort of made her more of a side character, and I think it was good that they added some sort of backstory with her moving school and things like that, rather than sorry, I meant that in the book she was more of a side character. In the show she had more backstory, which I think was really good. But I think it'd be really interesting to see in the 2 next season they've planned out, to sort of see her develop a bit more and see more of her story.
Yeah, that's good. It sort of shows that they're making a conscious effort to sort of have her on screen and tell her story, which is cool.
Yeah.
I'm quite intrigued to see how it goes with further seasons, because I feel like obviously I can't really see how it will be centered around Charlie and Nick's relationship for another further 2 seasons. So and considering the popularity the actress has at the moment, it'd be really great if she was to be more, I don't want to say centered again, but centered, and maybe focus on her relationship with I can't remember the bloke's name. He's the best friend of Charlie, but I can't remember what his name is.
Tao.
Ian, Tao, nice one. I think it'd be really cool to be able to see if anything blossoms between the two of them, because they have a really nice connection from what we've already seen.
Yeah. I think it would be sort of nice if in the 2 new seasons show maybe the different couples within the show. So move on to maybe Tao and Elle's relationship and how that's going to develop, and Darcy and Tara's and things like that. I think that'd be really interesting.
And do you think it's would you say it's important for there to still be a focus on Charlie and Nick's? Because obviously we have it in shows and films and whatnot, where there's where we highlight and broadcast moments of queer relationships. But would you say, is it important to for that relationship to be maintained and to continue to be healthy as a good representation, or do you think it's not very necessary? What are your thoughts?
I think it's still important to sort of see how that's going, but I think maybe having change of focus could be interesting too.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see more of the other relationships develop and see more of the rest of the cast, but I think it's definitely still important, because you hear a lot of straight people being high school sweethearts and going on to live such a happy and normal life, and a lot of queer people don't get that, and so it would be really nice to see them sort of, I guess, grow old together.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say, and say for maybe a younger self, or for queer people who are watching who are slightly younger than us, do you think this having this representation shown on such a highly respected platform like Netflix, do you think that will change people's perspectives towards queer dating and queer relationships and queer identities? Because I know for me, I'm 23, And I know for a fact that if I had seen this when I was like 15 and 16, it would have felt more normalized. Because like you said, like a lot of queer people, they don't have that high school romance. Do you know what I mean? And I think having a show like this definitely, I don't know, it kind of just communicates hope and like a sense of belonging more than anything else. You know what I mean?
I think obviously it'll be very important to the viewers. Like you said, I never saw anything like this when I was like 15, 16. But it'll also be so important for sort of big corporations, streaming services, film studios, TV shows, producers to see that this sort of story, people like this sort of story, and that this isn't something that you have to sort of censor in order to make bigger sales elsewhere, that people want to see this and that this is important.
What are we manifesting then for season 2 and 3? Personally, my mind's just for Elle to be the centre, Elle and her man.
Yeah, I want to see more of Elle. I want to get a little bit from the background relationships. I want to see them continue being happy together, and yeah, I'm just excited. It'll be good.
I think it'd just be so interesting to see like different like snippets of the rest of the characters' lives rather than all just being on sort of one or two people sort of going around everyone.
Also, I think it'll be quite interesting to see the development for other characters who there was this one guy in particular whose name I can't remember. You know, the guy that Charlie was with but not really with, and then he got quite Ben, and he got quite defensive and quite, I don't know what the word is, but quite defensive when Charlie and Nick were clearly like establishing something. I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens with him because, because of like ongoing issues like internalized homophobia, that can lead to a lot of queer people struggling to identify and navigate some sort of identity. So I think it'd be really nice to see if there's like a positive transition for him compared to what he's like currently, and quite refreshing as well for those who may not necessarily have come to terms with their identity yet and they're still trying to figure it all out.
That would be good. Yeah,
I think it would be interesting to see like his personal development, just how it's going to develop, really see what he's been dealing with.
I guess talking of representation and of the representation that sort of we didn't see when we were younger, was there any sort of LGBT plus representation that you did see and that made you think like, oh, maybe it's going to be okay? Anything that sort of positively affected you, even if it wasn't like explicitly LGBT?
I always found I don't think it was explicitly LGBT, but I'd always find it in like certain kid-rated shows where you'd have like characters that are very flamboyant, and it was very like, I don't want to say like evidently clear that they were a queer person because you can't really presume that based on like clothing or behavior. But like if you were to look on things like forums and other places like that, that would be like an indication. And I think, and those characters would generally be quite jolly and quite happy and quite positive. I think for me, subconsciously, that was probably my little like safety blanket. Do you know what I mean? Like having these characters who may have been queer and they were very, very feeling themselves and very like happy and very vibrant. But I think there's also quite, I don't know about you, but I also feel there's quite like a lot of there was, not so much now, but were like quite a few negatives. Like you'd find it where like if there was like queer characters, they would be very sexually promiscuous. So I remember I think it was an episode of Friends I watched actually not too long ago. And one of the guys who is, I don't know what character he's interested in, but to the point that it's quite uncomfortable to watch. And you just kind of think it's double standards because you wouldn't position or place a straight character doing this to a woman. Do you know what I mean? Especially in mainstream TV, more than often. Anyway.
Yeah, it makes it sort of seem predatory almost. Like here's this gay, but we're not going to say gay because ratings or whatever. Here's this gay character, and look what they're doing to this poor straight protagonist. And it's that sort of thing.
And I think it's also like a reason as to why some people can be so reluctant to coming out because they're perceived to have like quite a radical behavior. And to be honest, I'm someone who doesn't go by stereotypes at all, because like most of my friends challenge them, but most of my queer friends are like very very reserved and quite tame. Not that it matters if you're not. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously you do you.
Yeah.
But I just think it creates a really unhealthy, unfair dynamic, and really unfair expectations as well, more than anything.
It's like there's nothing wrong with being super flamboyant and open and promiscuous, but if you're, especially for like a younger audience who's sort of starting to figure out their gender and sexuality, you can't really relate to that, especially if you're not yet feeling the sort of confidence in sort of being confident in your identity. You can't really relate to the flamboyant.
Yeah, and like if that's the only thing that's being presented on TV, I think that also creates like further issues. And it's like, okay, well, if I'm part of this community and I'm not behaving this way, then like, where do I fit in? How do I fill the boxes? I think that can be quite an issue as well, or could have been. I think Heartstopper was very good at showing the range of it, because obviously Charlie's a bit more camp, and obviously like Nick's like a rugby player, isn't he? I think that's also really important to show how like you don't have to necessarily, or like don't feel ashamed or indifferent if you're more, I don't know, perceived to be masculine and you're still like a woman that likes women, or like a man that likes men.
I think just talking about like representation as a whole, we can like think about characters in films and shows that just don't get explicitly labeled. That can be quite frustrating to see, because you just sort of want to know, like it might be like rumored things like that online, but like Will from Stranger Things with the new season, things like that. But I feel like lots of people probably find comfort in that too, sort of like being able to.
There are pros and cons to it. It sort of shows that you don't need to rush into labeling yourself, but also it can be, like you said, frustrating.
Do you think labels are necessary?
Only for your own like personal comfort. I don't think they're necessary for, I don't know. I think they're only really necessary if you feel that they are. If it would make you feel more comfortable and secure in your identity to put a label on it, then that's important.
But not in the sense where it's more to get like validation from others. So that's not.
No, I don't think so. It can be quite important, especially if you're a public figure, then it can be important to be a role model for younger people that also identify with that label. If you're just trying to live your regular life, if it makes you feel more comfortable to label yourself, then you should. But if you can't relate to any labels, then that's fine.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't be like a compulsory thing. It should sort of be about your own personal preference and how you feel about it.